Hello everyone, Zach Wilson, Hood County Chess Club here. Today we're continuing our series on the endgame basics and how to win at chess. Today we're going to take a look at the back rank checkmate, the edge of board mates, including the staircase checkmate, shrink the box with king and rook only, and we're going to make our way to Anastasia's mate, which we see here on the screen. If you've never seen this mating pattern, it's very famous, and we're going to get to that at the end of the video. Now we're trying to keep these videos at less than 10 minutes, so let's just go ahead and dive right into the staircase checkmate. The idea of an edge of board mate is that we want to move black's king all the way back to the edge of the board, and we're going to deliver checkmate down this rank here, and we're going to have this rank covered so that the king can't escape. So let's take a look at what that might look like. So it's white's turn to move, and white already has a rook that is taking away white's available squares, or excuse me, black's available squares. So black is going to have to retreat towards the other edge of the board. So we grab our rook and deliver check. And again, black's king cannot move down the board because of this rook here. And he cannot move side to side because of this rook here. So he's stuck having to choose one of these three options. Now the best try for black is to try and use his king to attack white's rooks. So he moves diagonally. So now white is going to leave the threat or the barrier or the fence or the wall, whatever you want to call it, of this rook here because white can't move himself into check. So we grab the other rook, kind of like going up a flight of stairs. That's why they call it the staircase checkmate. And then black attacks white's rook. So this rook is in danger of black's king, and so we have to move it. If white makes this critical error, moving this rook and saying check, black will simply capture the rook, and now white is down a piece. So white's not going to make that mistake. Instead, we're going to use the long range attack of the rook and move to the other side of the board. Black continues with trying to protect himself. And the reason is this square here. If this rook tries to move into that square to deliver check, well then black's king will simply take him, and we have that same problem. So again, white's rook simply repositions to the other side of the board. Notice how these rooks are offset. They're not on the same file. That way they can easily walk up the board. So black tries to chase down the rooks, but black is too slow because the king only moves one square at a time. Rook delivers check, king has to move, rook delivers check, black gets to the edge of the board, and as we can see the threat, this rook is covering the entire 7th rank, trapping black on the edge of the board, allowing this rook to deliver checkmate. The king has no squares to go to. These are all covered by white's rooks, and he's done. So let's move to what I call shrink the box. What if white only had a single rook? Well, as we can see, the white rook is kind of creating a box or an area that the black king cannot get to. So the idea is to shrink the box, move the king to the edge of the board, and deliver checkmate. So in this, I always teach my students to ask one question before you move. Can I shrink the box? If the answer is yes, we're going to move our rook. If the answer is no, we're going to move our king. So the idea is very simple. As long as the rook is adjacent to the king, then it is never in danger of being taken by black's king. So we simply move our rook here because it is still adjacent to the king, which makes it safe. The rook has now shrunk its box. In other words, you can see that the box it's creating, or the fence, is much smaller. So black has to move his king. Well, you would think, can I shrink the box? And the answer is no, because if the white rook moves here, then black's king can simply capture it, and now we're at a draw or stalemate because white doesn't have the pieces he needs to cause checkmate. So since we cannot shrink the box, we move our king, keeping it adjacent to our rook for safety. Black gives his best try, and we ask, can I shrink the box? And the answer is no, because if I simply check him, black has the choice of going here or here. So I guess in one sense, it kind of shrinks the box, but it's not very forcing. So instead, we're simply going to move our king. This forces black to give ground. So if he goes here, we're going to move our rook and shrink the box. Black's best try is to move here. And so again, we cannot shrink the box here because black would simply take the rook. So we move our king. And this process continues. And I'm just going to make some moves here to show you that it's shrinking the box. You can see that white's rook is shrinking things. And this process continues. We could be fun and go this direction and now create a different box if we wanted to. But let's just kind of move through it. I shrink the box. Black retreats. I shrink the box. Black retreats. I move my king. Black tries to fight me off. I move my king. He doesn't have a lot of good squares. I shrink the box. He keeps moving. I move my king. He tries to mess with me a little bit. That's okay. I move my king back, forcing him to move again. I shrink my box. He's trying to stay off the edge of the board as best he can. And of course, you can continue to see the black's box keeps getting smaller and smaller until eventually he's going to get stuck having to choose the edge of the board. He's only got 3 squares left, all of them on the edge of the board. Doesn't matter which one he picks. We have now trapped him on the edge of the board. Black's king is about to lose. So just to kind of give a demonstration of what we can do, we can move our king over. He comes back. We can move our king over. He moves back. And then there's checkmate. Why? Because white's king are covering these squares, so black cannot move in there, and the rook is delivering checkmate on the edge of the board. So what does that look like earlier in the game? Well, this is a king's castled position. He's got his pawns in front of him, and as you can see, he's effectively trapped on his own back rank. This is the traditional back rank checkmate. We can see that white's rook can simply move to the c8 square, delivering checkmate, because the king has nowhere to go. His pawns are in his way, trapping himself against the back rank. Now, if we look at white's position, we notice that white has an escape square, so that if it was black's turn to move, and his rook was able to come down to the a1 square and attack, what we can see is that white's king can escape. So you'll often see somewhere in the game the pawns in front of the king moving to create an escape. But unfortunately, in this position, we simply move here and we deliver checkmate along the back rank. So what does that look like in Anastasia's mate? Well, this is a very famous mating pattern, and what we want to recognize is that there's a hole here for black's king to try and escape. And so we're going to try and deliver a checkmate along the edge of the board on the side. And here's how this would look. White's knight can hop here and deliver a check. Because it's a check, black has to respond by saving his king. There's nobody here to take the knight, and you can't block a knight, which can jump over pieces, so the king has to run away. And his only options are these 2 squares. Now his best try is to get out of the corner, so he could try to come out. But the problem is that the knight is going to be covering his escape squares, and the rook is going to eventually come over and deliver a checkmate. Now this looks a little messy, so let's clean it up. And let's kind of walk through it. Knight hops, delivering check. King tries to escape, but the problem is the knight covers this square, the pawn is in his way, the knight covers this square, he is on the edge of the board trapped, and in comes our rook, checkmate. Game over. So let's go into Anastasia's mate when it looks more like this, like the front of the video, of how this would work in a game. So again, we can see that our knight is threatening to come in, and our rook is threatening to come over. And wouldn't you know it, my mouse has died. Connection lost. Oh, there we go. We're going to have to change those batteries. So the rook is threatening to come over to deliver that checkmate. So how do we make this happen? Very simple. Queen sacrifice. The queen takes the pawn, screaming check at the king, and the king has no reply except to capture. We've thrown away our queen. Well, let's back that up. We see that that's coming. Step 1. Knight comes in. King has nowhere to go but the corner. The knight has now created the edge of the board pattern. Now the queen comes in and says checkmate. The king has no choice but to take. Over comes the rook, and as you can see from the knight and then the rook, this is checkmate. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video, and we'll see you again on our Hood County Chess YouTube page. Please check us out on Facebook and like our page there for updates on playing over the board in person, and we'll see you again soon.